That's the real testament as to what makes House of the Dragon work, is that while they're offering build-up, while they're creating conflict that feels earned and shocking us with twists and turns and bringing characters into the fold that we did not expect to be so compelling, so complex, and so emotionally nuanced and even relatable, it's at the same time offering constant catharsis. Welcome back to my channel, House of the Dragon fans. It is time to discuss episode 7, as we do every week when we gather right here discussing all the episodes and all the spoilers. And this week we're dealing with the fallout of the death of Laena Velaryon, bringing in all the main houses to King's Landing for the first time since the wedding of Rhaenyra, and there's no time jump. So if last week's episode was meant to re-establish the world and the conflicts at hand, this episode launches all of those conflicts into the next stage for what will be a banger of a back half of this season, because this is kind of one of those episodes that changes everything, because all the houses are in this kind of pressure cooker environment. At one point, one element or another snaps and the conflicts come to a head to the point where there's no going back. This feels very much like it's another midpoint for the back half of the season specifically, where basically everything changes. And one of my favorite elements of this entire episode is the main theme of prisoners. Every character in here feels like a prisoner to someone or something. Alicent, a prisoner to the fear she has for her children's lives should Rhaenyra take the throne, as well as the debt she owes to Sir Larys Strong. Rhaenyra herself has that same fear of being a mother, as well as a prisoner to her marriage with Laenor, and vice versa. Viserys is a prisoner to this secret he holds about his own daughter, and just these dynamics become so compelling to watch as every character just feels trapped. But again, like we talk, the pressure is building, the tension is there, creating friction throughout this episode from the moment it begins, and by the end, it snaps. We have the legendary confrontation between Alicent and Rhaenyra that we will get to, but as always, we must chop this review up in character chapters and start with the princess in waiting herself, the queen in waiting, in fact, Rhaenyra Targaryen, one of my favorite characters in this show that is continuously fascinating to watch as she evolves and grows through her arc in this. And one of my favorite aspects of this episode is how she meets Daemon for the first time in 10 years since the wedding, since he last left Westeros, and now we see this broken, defeated Daemon who has lost everything now. He doesn't care for the customs of old Valyria, he doesn't care for his name, he does not seek to reconcile with his brother, who seeks an embrace, a moment of compassion, but Daemon is so proud to seek that out, to accept that for himself. But now, once these two come together, and from the moment they first lay eyes on each other, you see the smirk on both their lips. Now it's Rhaenyra who holds the power over Daemon. It is such a brilliant move. It is such a different dynamic between these two since the last time they were together, before Rhaenyra got married, before she last pleaded with him to take her. And in this episode, that technically happens again. They lay together, they consummate their union, and eventually get married, forging this Targaryen alliance in the customs of old Valyria, shifting the power dynamics at play in here. But now Rhaenyra is not begging. Now Rhaenyra is not asking her uncle to do this. Now she's telling him to do this. Now she's demanding this, and she's also liberating herself from this farce of a marriage with Laenor, but also liberating him. He wants to go back to the sea. He wants to be free to pursue his happiness, and he does not care for the power. He does not care for his name like his father. He knows the children aren't his, and he's happy with that. And I love how Rhaenyra displays her power, where once Daemon agrees to marry her, once Laenor is out of the way, She has this whole plan laid out. This is not Daemon's doing. Daemon is an errand boy for Rhaenyra in this episode, and it is brilliant. The Queen in Waiting now holds all the power, and it is such an evolution, such a long way she's come ever since that first half of the show, where she continuously felt stifled, powerless, useless by her father. Now she's holding nothing back. Her life is in danger. Her children's lives are in danger as they continuously get accused of being bastards, which they are, let's face it, and I'm probably expecting a new baby to pop out of their belly soon, because I'm guessing we're gonna have a Rhaenyra and Daemon legitimate baby. The episode doesn't do anything too overt with Daemon as far as his character is concerned, but it is in displaying how different his rapport with Rhaenyra now is that it brings back his kind of joie de vivre, and a little bit of the old Daemon is brought back in that wedding ceremony, the sharing of the blood when he stands next to Rhaenyra after Alicent attempts to stab Viserys Velaryon and he stops Sir Criston from approaching the little boy. It's just fascinating, and I'm so glad to see that these two are finally brought back together. Now the lines of war have been divided, and I love Alicent in this episode. Much like Emma Darcy, Olivia Cook, man, she stomped her feet in this episode and she said this role is now mine. We see Alicent in a place that should be so fragile psychologically, as she's living under the thumb of Sir Larys Strong, who continuously observes her through this episode. But more than that, we see the fear she has for her children ruling over her and every single decision she makes. Through the whole funeral scene, she's constantly looking at her children and back at Rhaenyra. Even with Sir Otto back as the Hand of the King, it clearly has not made Alicent's fear for her life and that of her children's diminish whatsoever. And why that works so well, why it creates for such a compelling narrative, is because, once more, it reinforces that idea of the House of Targaryen self-destroying, and we see the paranoia, the fear, and the obsession and pursuit for the perseverance of the bloodline to continuously destroy this house and to be generational. Last week, we saw them trying to reconcile with one another. In this episode, we saw Viserys trying to reconcile with Daemon, and in this episode as well, we see the children violently attacking one another, all for the right to command the dragon Vhagar, which Aemond takes hold over. He bonds with her after the death of Laena Velaryon. Her children, heartbroken at this, at what feels like betrayal, the eye of young Daemon is taken by one of his cousins. And so war is already being fought amongst Targaryen walls by the Targaryen family at such a young age. And so when that confrontation comes and everything boils over, where Alicent pleads to Viserys to take the eye of young Viserys Velaryon, and by the way, Paddy Considine steals that moment where he interrogates both his children about who is spreading these lies and rumors. And I don't know, man, but I'm fearing that Alicent might just mandate for Viserys to be murdered. It's brilliantly accomplished from a character standpoint. That confrontation is so unbelievably intense between the two former best friends, but even the fight between the kids when Aemond returns after bonding with Vhagar is so violent. The cut is so big and so nasty, breaking one another's noses, having all of them pile up on Aemond, as Aegon throughout this episode is just this pathetic drunk that his grandfather has to take care of. But then even Otto is so elated that now they have the biggest dragon in the history of Westeros and in the history of Valyria on their side for this war, that the Hightowers are ready to fight. They realize what has happened, as should all of us watching this episode. As soon as the moment comes when Rhaenyra grabs Alicent's hand, and then you have the cut that cannot be mended, like that scar is so ugly, but with the dagger that Viserys trusted onto Rhaenyra, that makes an irreparable cut between the two. It is exactly what should have happened. This episode needed a moment that represented a paradigm shift of immeasurable proportions. Because last week's episode had so much to reestablish and reconnect certain dots, we couldn't afford another time jump, but we could do a lot when it comes to the characters. There isn't a lot of time that this episode spends, but a lot happens between each and every one of the important dynamics at play. The Game of Thrones is being played, and there are so many moves accomplished on the proverbial chessboard. It is, however, not a perfect episode. I'd rank this right below the premiere after episode 4 and 5. But this episode, I felt like there were a couple of scenes missing. Despite not having a big time jump, I needed to see the moment when Otto comes back. I needed to see the moment where he first sees his daughter again. I needed that moment between him and Viserys. And despite the quick moments that we have between him and Alicent in here, I just needed more. I needed more emotion. I also needed to see a little bit more between Larys and Alicent. He's always there in the background, the little weasel, constantly looking at the queen. He even asks her if he should do something about Rhaenyra and about the other cousins. Should he kill one of the children? And now Alicent knows best, which is a really good moment where we see, okay, she grows and she's still holding on to the decency she at least professes she has, or at least she's trying to fool herself into believing she has. But I needed something more. I needed a more intense interaction between these two, and I also wished we could have seen more between Laenor and Rhaenyra, because from last week's episode where they decide to go to Dragonstone, and now this episode where they have one scene together, because he is so depressed at the death of his sister, who was so young, who died at childbirth after Daemon made the decision, and I don't think anyone else knows it within the characters of the show, but Daemon made the exact same decision that Viserys made at the beginning of this season, and I think that's a lot of what is haunting Daemon right now. But to better illustrate the reconciliation between Rhaenyra and Laenor once she decides she's going to set her husband free to be whoever he wants to be in Pentos or in Bravos or wherever he goes, I wish you could have had one more scene with the two of them. Not just that scene where he goes to check on her cut and looks at his children one last time. That is a beautiful contrast to how Corlys and Rhaenys talk about their legacy, and both of them raise such compelling points. Their points of view are both incredibly valid, but they're straining the marriage so much. And after meeting one tragedy at the beginning of the episode, these Velaryons meet another one at the end. I think a quick moment, even without dialogue, between Laenor and Rhaenyra could have worked very well, intercut with the moment she's talking to Daemon about the plan, and when we see Laenor with his head shaved, rowing onto the ship as he's going away, as they have the pretend body of Laenor burnt, and the Velaryons meet another disgrace in their lives. That could have helped immensely, just a look between these two, an understanding that they come to together. And I also wanted to see more of the Velaryons, because it has been so long since we saw them having importance in the plot. Not just be there for the wedding, and last week they weren't here whatsoever. Rhaenys and Corlys are such great characters, and we have a good moment between Corlys and his grandchildren, we have a good moment between husband and wife, and we have the disgraceful moment in the end, but I just wish they were more present. I like to see that Corlys is siding with Rhaenyra when that confrontation between her and Alicent comes to a fold. There were just quite a few moments, quite a few interactions that I wanted more and I felt could have benefited the episode immensely. Suffice it to say, this episode has a lot of tea. But before I dive into my final thoughts on this week's House of the Dragon, I need you to start the conversation about it in the comments below. Let me know how you rank the episodes thus far. What was your favorite dynamic on this one? And what do you think is coming next? Don't spoil anything if you read the books. I haven't. I don't want to know any spoilers. But if you're enjoying the weekly House of the Dragon reviews, or if you're just enjoying this specific House of the Dragon review, or if you just love movies and TV, this is the place to be. So consider clicking that subscribe button and you won't miss any future conversations on your favorite movies and TV. When the show has issues, it finds itself constantly at such a high level of excellency. Those little nitpicks just stand out because the characters are so well fleshed out, because the story feels so earned, the conflicts feel so natural, the payoffs feel gratifying. That's the real testament as to what makes House of the Dragon work, is that while they're offering build-up, while they're creating conflict that feels earned and shocking us with twists and turns and bringing characters into the fold that we did not expect to be so compelling, so complex, and so emotionally nuanced and even relatable, it's at the same time offering constant catharsis. As it builds up small story threads, it pays off bigger ones that are coming off of previous episodes. Ever since the beginning of the season, we constantly see payoffs and build-ups throughout that accumulate and feel so entirely connected. And that's the brilliance of the show. Ever since it started, is its constant pace of setup, payoff, and a constant sense of danger and stakes for each and every one of its characters. And so this episode is not my favorite, I have my nitpicks with it, but it's putting itself back in pace with the rest of the series and building up to what promises to be an all-out war that still feels intimate because it's the self-destruction of the Targaryens. It's a prophecy that they established, they've been building up to, and now we're seeing it all come full circle. And it's really awesome when stories do that and make it feel so effortless. So hats off to Miguel Sapochnik, who once again nailed it in his direction. But those are just my thoughts on House of the Dragon episode 7. Let me know what you make of it in the comments below. Thank you so much for joining me weekly for all the House of the Dragon reviews. In case you are, and if you aren't, there's a playlist right up here and at the end of this video. Thank you so much for watching, and big thanks to my channel members for always supporting the channel. So until the next one, love each other and love the movies.